What do a gorilla with a gift for art, a sarcastic oak tree, and a group of kids turning into animals to fight aliens all have in common? They all came from the brilliant, slightly wild imagination of today's guest. Long before Kidlit was cool, she was ghostwriting Sweet Valley Twins and dreaming up Animorphs with her husband, author Michael Grant, a series that had convinced us we too might secretly be able to morph into a red-tailed hawk. She since won the Newbery Medal, made us all cry over a gorilla in a mall, and reminded us that even trees have opinions. Funny, fearless, and known for making us laugh and cry over a gorilla. Please welcome the wildly imaginative Katherine Applegate.
Best introduction ever. Thank you. I loved
Thank you
it.
so much. Well, you deserve all the credit.
That's it makes me feel a little old though, because that's quite a lot of books you're covering. And thank you for mentioning Sweet Valley right off the top.
You've given voice to gorillas, trees, aliens, and kids trying to find where they belong. But I'm curious about your own early chapters. What were the stories from your childhood that made you want to become a writer?
Well, I'm always really honest about this with kids. And when I do school visits, I generally get cheers. And I don't know if that's something to be concerned about or not, but I was not a big reader. That I'm sure has been the exception to the rule in terms of the interviews you've done, because most authors I know are, reading in utero. They loved books from the moment they could read. And I just found it dull. I didn't see the point. And I happen to have a daughter who has dyslexia. Obviously, that can make it very challenging, but that wasn't my particular issue. And then Mrs. Gray in East Grand Rapids, Michigan, Bretton Downs School, elementary school, read Charlotte's Web to our class. I think it was third grade. And I was just enchanted. I like to say it was my gateway drug because at that moment I went, oh, wait a minute, there's something to this whole thing. And I was animal obsessed. I was one of those kids, absolutely sure I was going to be a vet when I grew up. So here was a book with talking animals, and it was all I needed. So I think it's important for kids to know that there's always a book out there that's going to be life-changing, a best friend book, and it can take a while to find it, which is why, people doing like this kind of thing are so important because you help connect readers and books.
Many readers grew up with Animorphs, a series that blended action, moral complexity, and body horror with real heart. What do you think made it connect so deeply with readers?
Well, it probably started with the body horror. It was really funny when we came up with that idea because I really wanted to get kids into the heads of animals. And my husband Michael said, it's got to be sci-fi. That's the only way to go at it. And we ended up churning out on a monthly basis, I don't know, 50 something books. There were like 60 something in the series. And we realized right off the bat that there had to be humor and heart. But it wasn't until it got a lot farther along in the series that we got as dark as we did. I mean, it ended up being a story about war and about the repercussions of war. And, we touched on things like war crimes and torture. And I'm sure when we started out, the editors in charge had no idea what they were getting themselves into. But what's been really gratifying is Animorphs fans are now in their, 20s, 30s, having children of their own. I've had people name their kids Tobias. I've had dogs named Tobias show up, Tobias being the most popular. But more importantly, they look back now and a lot of them will say, at the time I didn't really get the darkness, or I didn't understand why you went where you went, because it did get pretty sad at points. But now in retrospect, I understand, and it helped me look at the world a little bit differently. So that's hugely gratifying. And we of course had no idea it would have that kind of effect. So really, really so very grateful for those fans.
Whether it's a gorilla longing for freedom in the one and only Ivan, a refugee navigating a new life in Home of the Brave, or a talking tree trying to protect her community in Wishtree, Your books often explore empathy, second chances, and unlikely friendships. Are those themes something you intentionally build in from the start, or do they naturally unfold as your characters come to life?
It's interesting. I hadn't really those particular three themes I hadn't really clicked on. So obviously it's somewhat unconscious. Obviously, you start with a good story. I mean, if you start thematically, there's the danger you're going to get didactic, you're going to be boring. You have to love your characters and you have to start there. Um, I do go back to second chances a lot, maybe because it took me a while to become a writer, to get up the nerve. I got a degree in English, which is always a very good idea, and then became the world's worst waitress for years and years, and really hesitated to dip my toe into the literary waters. And then I started doing ghostwriting for things like Sweet Valley and started to realize, this is really fun. Maybe I could do it. But it took me quite a while. So maybe that's the second chances portion. I do I think a lot about um, kids who are not necessarily ostracized, but coming from a different place and trying to find their place. The book I just finished touches on Ukrainian refugees. It's that's not the focus of the book, but I seem to go back to that a lot too. So I think you just start writing a story that you can stick with. I think that's the hardest part for most writers. It's not so much coming up with an idea, it's knowing, okay, I'm going to stick with this one through thick and thin. And because you have dark days, where I'm putting this book in timeout, I can't do it anymore. And it's really important that you love the core story.
How did you know when to maybe quit being a waiter to go into writing?
And I'm really honest with people because it is a tough gig. And publishing right now, I think, is particularly volatile just because the zeitgeist, the whole world is volatile right now. And so people are a little tentative. Um, so I think it's really important to have a way to pay your rent. That don't forget that's part of the deal. But don't make that so much a focus that you don't allow time for yourself to create. And that's a really hard balance. I know it was when we were writing Animorphs. We had our first kid, and it was, a book a month and a baby at the same time. It was hard. But when I started writing, I did everything and anything. I worked temp jobs, I cleaned toilets, I was a waitress, I watered plants, anything to just buy me a little more time. And I think you have to want to do it. And if you really want to do it, that stuff won't matter at all.
I mean, good for you. It sounds like, you're doing all this odd jobs. You definitely deserve your writing success as you do now.
Well, I don't know about that. I have been extremely, extremely lucky, but it is true. I fully and lovingly call myself a hack because I'm one of those people who just kept writing and writing and writing, and I'd write anything. And if somebody said, "Will you write this?" I go, "Sure, I'll try." And believe me, didn't always succeed. There are a lot of books out there I prefer not to remember, but that's how you learn.
Your book, Wishtree, has been challenged in some schools for its use of non-binary pronouns and themes of inclusion. As an author who writes with so much heart and hope, how do you respond to when your work is caught in the crosshairs of censorship?
I meant to tell you at the top of this that I am so thrilled with the work you're doing here, and I love the backstory that went with it, the catalyst for getting mad about your own beloved book, and wanting to find a way to fight back. It's so important. It's it's hard because we get tired. And there are so many things to make noise about right now. And banned books almost feel like sort of the canary in the coal mine. I mean, it's been a problem, obviously, off and on forever, but certainly these last few years. And so many of us are tired. So I have great admiration for people like you and for all especially librarians who are out there in the front lines doing the hard work, talking to the parents and trying to remind everybody that the best library in the world has something in it to offend everyone. I love that quote. It sums it up so perfectly. And I've been, the thing with Wishtree was interesting just because it was so innocuous and so silly. Not that most of this isn't silly. And I was really struck by the way the community responded. In that particular case, it was a book, a community, a small community that had been doing one book, one school, one book reads for a long time, and actually including other elementary schools as well. So it was a well-established thing. You would read this book, and the moms and dads would have a schedule, and everybody read it, and it just became a real point of community connection, which is, of course, what books are all about. So they were halfway through Wishtree when somebody objected to it, somebody who wasn't even from that particular county. And I think they were taken aback. They didn't really have a procedure in place. They didn't quite know how to respond. And when I went to visit the area, I was able to go to a public library, which generously opened their arms and talk to all the kids, talk to all the parents, outside of the context of the school system. And they were just, to a person, lovely and engaged and disappointed in what had happened. So a lot of times there's incredible goodwill, and we're not quite sure how to channel it. And I think that's why we have people like you, organizations like Penn, like ALA. There are so many places you can go now, when you have a challenged book, to get support and to know what your next steps should be.
Your upcoming picture book, Pocket Bear, tells the touching story of a tiny stuffed bear who travels with a soldier during World War I, a symbol of love, hope, and a comfort in dark times. What inspired you to write this story, and what do you hope readers will carry with them after reading?
Well, I will show you what inspired me, my in-house prop here. This is a pocket bear. Let's see if I can get him up there closer. And he's a World War I era. He's he's quite delicate. And what was so poignant about these guys, they're 3.5 inches tall. They were designed by a company called J.K. Farnell in London. Same people who ended up making the bear on whom that Pooh Bear was based on. They were designed to go in the breast pocket of a soldier's uniform, given to them usually by a sweetheart or a family member as a token of love. And the eyes are a little bit higher on top of the head than is normal. So when you look down, you would see this little bear looking up at you, and presumably feel hope, feel maybe you have a token of good luck. And these were young men heading for the trenches. So it just the beauty and the sadness of it just really struck me. And I thought there's a story there somewhere. So I started delving into the toy world, and the story of how teddy bears evolved is really fascinating, because they were developed both in Brooklyn by a guy named Mitchton, I think was his name, and then also in Germany at almost precisely the same time. And there's a story that may be apocryphal, that the first shipment of teddy bears out of Germany, they weren't called teddy bears, by the way, that was an American thing, sank with thousands of bears aboard. So I used that little tidbit, and from that, the story kind of took on a life of its own. It's narrated by a cat, which was fun because she's very sarcastic and kind of in your face. And it takes place in a household, as I mentioned earlier, where there's a mom and a daughter who are refugees from Ukraine. So the themes of war are there, but I think in a gentle way that will be really easy for younger readers, younger elementary readers, to handle. And it was really a joy to write.
How did you get your hands on a Pocket Bear? Because judging
I
by how you were holding it, it doesn't look like they still manufacture it anymore.
Oh no. Well, they do. There are replicas. I found him. I think it was on eBay. And he wasn't too expensive. I'm not sure they knew what he was. Uh, but sometimes I saw some the other day, and they were a set of three, and they wanted 4,000 euros for them. So I think they're at this point they're relatively rare. Um, but you can find photos online and see they were very charming. They were called mascot bears as well as soldier bears, and there were mascot cats as well. And it was became very commonplace. You know, everybody had one. So.
Why did you decide about why did you decide to write about the bear, not the cat or the soldier?
Oh, you must be a writer. That's an interesting question because I went through like every POV possibility. And choosing point of view is so troubling for me. I think it is for a lot of writers because it changes a story so dramatically. Um, at the end of the day, the cat, whose name is Zephyrina, was everywhere, everywhere I needed her to be. And that was part of it, just logistics. And then her voice was so kind of sardonic. It seemed like a nice antidote to this kind of almost, you know, extremely sweet other story about the bears. So it balanced it nicely. And you know, sometimes a character just takes off and they take over the page whether you want them to or not. It was one of those. So I've had other characters, you know, I played with them, I've worked with them for months and months, and then I've just had to kill them off because they were so annoying. So you know, it's a 50-50 chance when you're working with a writer.
Your stories have always reminded us that even with the smallest characters, whether it's a gorilla in the mall, or a refugee finding its way, or a wise old oak, can leave the biggest impact. And now with Pocket Bear, you're giving us another unforgettable reminder that love, courage, and second chances can come within the smallest, fluffiest packages. We can't wait for readers to meet him.
You are so kind. And thank you again for the work you're doing. This is so important. And know that you're making a huge difference. So thank you. I really
Thank you for
appreciate it.
those words. Thank you.